Alright, so next we're going to talk about the basics of color. Now, color is like light, it's a huge topic, and light and color are very intertwined. And once again, we're going to go over more of this later in the course, but I also really recommend checking out my light and color course, which goes way into depth on light and color specifically and how their relationships interact and such. But to start off, just a few things. One, to keep in mind, light is almost always colored at least a little bit. It's very rare that you get a white light, and the color of that light is going to affect the highlights and stuff of the object you're painting, and same with the shadows. The shadows are typically going to be the color of the ambient light in the setting of your painting. So those are some things to keep in mind. But as far as picking colors goes, we're going to use the wheel mask method, or the gamut mapping. So you can see here we have 3 color wheels, and each of them are blocked off except for one portion that is a triangle. And what this does is it limits the number of colors that you can use to create your painting. So if we look at this first one over here, let's go ahead. I'm going to make a new layer so I can draw on this. If you look over here, even though the entire color wheel has all the colors in it, this gamut map only shows what's inside of this triangle. Now you'll notice that over here in the pink section and the green section, it only gets about halfway to where the total amount of saturation could be. The closer we get to the center, the more desaturated the colors are, and the closer we get to the edge, the more saturated they are. Now there's different types of masks you can make. This one just happens to be a triangle, but you could do squares, rectangles, teardrop shapes. There's lots of different kinds, but for this we're going to go with a triangle. Now you notice that the primary color or colors, which is red and orange, or a reddish orange color, is all the way saturated. So with that color we can get pretty bright, while these other 2 colors are going to stay a little bit closer to the middle. Okay, so if we were to take that triangle and flip it around, it's the same thing, just the opposite. So we have green / tealish color as our brightest, most saturated color, and then a yellow and a blue that are about mid saturation, right? And then once again, the least saturated colors are going to be right there in the middle. Now, you don't have to use a map every single time. You can kind of just figure this out in your head by choosing, okay, what's going to be my starting point? And if I'm going to be going with a triangle mask, then I need to know that my other 2 colors, which are going to be at about 1/3 from where they are only going to be about 50% of where they would be. And whatever's opposite of this on my color wheel, so let's say that green is my color, the opposite is going to be pink, magenta, that's going to be at 50%, or almost all the way, or sorry, less than 25%, almost all the way desaturated in the middle. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. Now let's go ahead and see some examples, and then we're going to go ahead and paint one ourselves. So if we look over here, this is an example using this mask up above. Okay, so the most saturated color is the red, which you can see in the eyes as well as in the background. Even though it's dark, it gets pretty saturated. So what that means, let's say we color pick this red up here, the most saturated part. We can go anywhere. If we bring up our color picker, we can go anywhere along the value range from dark to light, as long as we don't change the saturation or the hue. Okay, if we change the hue, we need to make sure that we're staying inside these color ranges, and that the closer we get to green or pink or these other colors, that the less saturation we have. Okay, so even though I'm all the way full saturation for the red, I picked a pretty dark value to paint down here to create the background. Okay, and all of the fur and stuff like that, that's just using different various desaturated colors. The background is desaturated green, and so on and so forth. You can see that it still looks like it represents almost a full color range, despite the fact that it is only this little triangle of colors I'm allowed to pick from. Same thing on this one, different triangle. These are the colors I created, and even though there's not really any actual white in here, that the fur is actually just kind of like a light blue, it kind of comes across as white based off of the colors in the background. Same with the beak. The beak is actually closer to a green, but it looks yellow because of the colors around it. So we're going to do an example. Your assignment is going to be to do all 3 of these. You'll have a clean one to start with, and what you'll be doing is doing the exact same thing I'm about to do, which is to paint each of these pictures using just the color mask, the gamut map that we have up here. They don't have to look exactly like mine. You can rearrange what colors go where and how you want to work it, but you're only allowed to use colors within the triangle, but you can use different values of those colors, and value just means how light or dark it is, but without changing the hue or the saturation to go outside that triangle. So if you want to pick this blue up here, you can totally do that, but let's say you want it lighter or darker, it's totally fair game. Or maybe you want to pick this really desaturated pink, but you want that lighter, that's fine as well, just as long as you, let's say you pick this color pink and then you make it even more saturated, well, now you're going outside the triangle. Or let's say you end up moving it somewhere over here, you're also going outside the triangle. Okay, so we're gonna do this one just to show an example, and then you will be able to do the rest on your own. So to start out, I'm just going to use a round brush here, standard brush, nothing fancy, and I'm gonna start with the background, which I'm going to do as, I'm thinking, I'm gonna do like a desaturated, well, we'll start with a really bright purple off the bat, I think, for the background, which later we'll end up kind of working in and changing. So you don't need to go super opaque. You can kind of let a little bit of the color show through as you paint. And right now I'm going a little bit sloppy because I can just come through and erase the outside edges of this once I've got it painted in there. So there's a background color. And then for the actual the creature itself, I'm going to do this one to have pink fur. So I'm going to go a little bit less saturated because that's bringing it closer to the center. We're not going outside of our triangle. And a little bit brighter. And this is the color we're going to start with for painting his fur. Alright, so once again, it's okay if we go outside the edge just a little bit. These don't have to be masterpieces, right? This is really just a color study. You're trying to understand how maps work and stuff like that, so you don't need to spend hours on these. You just need to really understand the color theory behind it to get this assignment finished. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish painting all this in. You can see I'm not really worrying about painting over the eyes or other parts because I'm going to be covering that up as well. All right, there we go. Now let's go ahead and pick a color for his eye. I think I want to do this tealish color for the eye. Let's actually go really desaturated here. Kind of like a gray color. And in the shadows, it's going to be pretty dark. And then in the highlights, we'll go a little bit in the blue range. Bring the value up really high, even higher than that. Okay, and then we'll pick let's get this pink color, and then we're going to go real dark here, almost black. And that will be the pupil. And then pretty much all the way white for the highlight there. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and do highlights on the fur. So I'm going to bring it a little bit closer to this pink, and we're going to make it lighter here. And just start brushing in a little bit of lighting. Once again, not anything too fancy, keeping it fairly simple. You don't also, I mean, if you want to follow along just to keep it simple, it's totally fine, but if you're feeling ambitious or a little bit advanced, you can totally do a different like lighting direction if you want the light to be coming from below or whatever. That's totally up to you. Just remember that whatever it is you decide to do, that the focus of this exercise is to stay within that color map and make this look like an image. You don't just want to go crazy all over the place and pick a bunch of random colors that don't kind of work together. Okay, so remember, keep your focus on getting the colors to look good. All right. Looks pretty good. And then we'll go even a little brighter. I'm going to bring it up here to the purple. Get pretty bright, a little less saturated. And then do our layer of the brightest lights here. All right, looks pretty good. Next, let's go ahead and move on to, I'm going to add a little bit to the background now. And we're going to pick this blue, this fairly desaturated blue. Even though we have the option to go really saturated, we're actually going to keep it fairly desaturated for now. And I'm going to bring up the size here and lightly brush in a little bit over this purple, still letting some of the purple show through, so we get that full range of colors that we have available to us. It gives a little bit more depth and life when we have multiple colors sort of bleeding through. And then I'm going to go over to this side as well, bring that pretty bright, and then starting down here at the bottom, start to brush that in a bit. Then let it sort of fade as it gets to the top. Okay, and then right up there at the top, we're going to go really saturated and have it be pretty dark. And brush this in up there at the top. And then have that fade as well. This color palette looks kind of retro and really colorful. All right, I'm gonna come over here. We're gonna pick this really, really desaturated bluish green color. Get a little bit closer to that. There we go. And we're gonna make it a little darker. This is what we're gonna use for the inside of the mouth here. All right, we're gonna move it a little bit more towards the blue, bring it a little darker, a little more saturated. Get the inside of this mouth here. And then same thing, a little bit closer to that blue, more saturated, a little darker. All right, and then we're gonna get this green, lighter green color that we picked originally and brighten it up quite a bit and use this for kind of bringing out those brighter parts of the mouth there. All right, there we go. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna bring this pink back and just work in a little bit more shadow under the eye there. There we go. And then also take some of this and darken up the eye a little bit. And let's get this eye a little bit more saturated so it kind of stands apart from the mouth a little more. Especially in that in-between sort of space where it transitions. All right, and then I'm going to move this into the almost the purple range. And just add a little bit more purple back there in the mouth area. Okay, now we need to do the beak and some of these other spots. So let's go first. I'm going to get this pink color pretty desaturated, bring the value up pretty high, even more desaturated. And we'll use this to do the ear here. Let's go even more desaturated. There we go. Then we can bring that a little darker. Get the shadows there in the ear. And then even darker. All right, now we have the beak. So for the beak, let's see what it is we want to do. We could try this blue and just keep it really light. Let's see how that looks. We're gonna paint in that whole thing with this color first. Now once again, I want to mention that if you want, you can paint exactly like this every time, but you don't have to get a grid every time. It's just something that you want to be thinking about and keeping in the back of your mind as you're painting, that you're kind of trying to sort of hit these masks sort of in your head a little bit in order to keep your colors more cohesive. You want to have one, maybe two colors that you can have pretty saturated, and then the rest that are a little bit less so. That way your colors don't end up coming across as just totally all over the place, which is a big problem for a lot of beginner, amateur level artists, and you want to really avoid that so that your art doesn't come across that way as well. So just keep that in mind. One or two saturated colors, the rest try and keep less saturated, and the farther that you get away from those saturated colors, the less saturation you have available to work with. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and add some little bit of highlights and shadows to that. So I'm gonna bring that a little bit more towards the purple for our shadows here, and bring it quite a bit darker there. The bottom side of this beak over here. Okay. And then get closer to the blue and get brighter and more saturated for the, a little brighter there for the highlights here. And let's go even less saturated so we can get brighter. There we go. And then we can go almost all the way white to do our last round of highlights there. All right, looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the edge really quick before we move on to the sort of spots and markings. Alright, so now to kind of tie everything together and make our palette a little bit more cohesive, I'm going to do some markings on the top of the head, and I'm actually going to do these in the blue color that we used earlier, except a little bit less saturated so that we can sort of tie it all in. I'm going to bring my brush size down a bit more. Right about there is good. Like I said, you don't have to do it exactly like me. You could do a different pattern if you want, or no pattern. You're just trying to remember that what you're focusing on is the color palette and tying this all together. All right. I'll blow this brush size up a little bit. And keeping it pretty soft and light, we're going to go over the top half just a little bit. And then as well as down here. All right, and then we're going to get brighter, and this will be sort of like our highlights layer. All right, and then now what this has done is it kind of makes the top look a little bit too dark, so we're going to go ahead and fix that by grabbing our teal color again and bringing up the brightness on that. And we're going to come up here and lighten up the background some, and probably switch it around so that the bottom is dark and the top is more light. Maybe even add in a little bit more of that purple. All right, excellent. And then I'm gonna go with very saturated, very dark purple for down here at the bottom, that we can fade up into this sort of teal color. And maybe even grab a little bit of this pink color as well. And then I'm gonna brighten up this highlight as well a little bit. Just to really get some contrast along that edge there. All right, and there we go. I'm not super satisfied with this last one, just because I think it could use a little bit more contrast between the foreground and the background. I think this helps a little bit, putting a little bit more of this teal down in there. About like that. That looks better. Cool. So yeah, there you go. There are 3 examples of how to do this assignment. Like I said, your job is to start from this point and come up with your own paintings using these color maps, staying inside those triangles. And if you want to do some extra ones where you create your own masks and experiment with it, totally go for it and post in the Q&A, see what other people have done and come up with. So that is it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.